Hello. I forgot to turn my screensaver off, so give me a second. Yay, okay. So, I'm here today to talk to you about the Internet of Cats, or trying new things is scary. My name's Rachel White. I'm Oho on Twitter. I'm a front-end engineer at IBM Watson, and I live in New York. So, let's go. This is me. I love cats. It might be hard to see. I can't see that screen right now, but this is in Tokyo last fall at a cat cafe, and I am covered in about 8 different cats that just so happened to blend in with the couch. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. And I've always kind of liked cats and tried to have ideas of like, how can I incorporate cats into technology? But trying new things is scary, and I'm mostly a front-end person. Like, I don't do hardware for my job. I don't really do back-end, except now because they're making me, and I can't really argue with them. So I was like, okay, how am I going to put this together? And I decided to think of ways that I could try something new. The ways that I think that trying things that are new are scary is like, you're trying something new from the beginning. It's a totally new project. You don't know how it's going to turn out. Maybe it'll suck. Maybe nobody will like it. Maybe it won't even work. Who knows? Using new technologies for the first time is always scary too. Like, you don't know if all the documentation is there. You don't know if people are going to be there to be available to help you out. You don't really know what's going to happen. Also scary is contributing to open source in general. And I knew that I wanted to contribute to open source, but I was afraid of all of the negativity around closed communities and stuff, and I was like, how am I going to do this? Pretty much like putting yourself out there in general is pretty terrifying. Let's talk about why it's scary for a little bit. Like I said, you know, maybe people will hate it. Maybe they won't like your project. Maybe they'll think your code sucks. Maybe they'll think you're stupid if they're jerks and think that that matters. Imposter syndrome sucks. Like, are you even good enough to finish this project? Like, will you be able to handle the code if it's something that you're not particularly familiar with? And the inclusiveness of communities. I see this happen more with smaller projects that have a certain amount of contributors that have always been contributing to it. And if somebody comes in and wants to change something, sometimes they'll just get ignored, or sometimes people just won't be very receptive to the feedback. Bad behavior in open source in general and in tech. I've seen a lot of people on GitHub lately that are just the equivalent of a Twitter egg, where they're anonymous. They don't provide anything really productive other than complaining about terminology, code of conducts, that kind of stuff, which gets me into people complaining about code of conducts existing, which if you're a good person, you shouldn't complain about that, obviously. So some examples of bad behavior that I've seen are feigned ignorance, which is I've encountered in jobs before where instead of giving constructive criticism if somebody doesn't know something, you just go, oh, you didn't know about this? Like, you should have known, instead of just telling you about it so you don't have to ask again. Completely ignoring contributions in open source stuff. So if somebody, takes the time to want to contribute to something that you're a part of and you just ignore them, it's not going to make them want to participate in the future, which isn't a way to grow communities. Alternately, for maintainers, a demanding user base, which if you notice, I've talked to a couple people about this, as soon as somebody open sources a new project, usually the first slew of open pull requests or issues will be people complaining about spelling, grammar, they don't like the way that certain things are done, and just complaining in general instead of being happy that there's something new for them to try. And also useless pull requests for the sake of a green timeline. You don't need to be that person that makes the first pull request fixing a couple commas and periods just for the sake of commenting first on a post. It's your GitHub timeline is not an indicator of your self-worth, and I really wish that more people would realize that. Also, insulting the contributor. I don't even know why I have to say this. It makes no sense. You shouldn't insult people that are trying to be productive. Just don't do it. Or disagreeing over trivial things. By trivial things, I guess it's not really trivial, but there's been a lot of stuff lately with people complaining about wanting to change terminology and get rid of the master-slave terminology, which is completely warranted, and you shouldn't argue over it if it's still going to function the same way, but not make people uncomfortable. So when I was starting on this project and wanting to get involved in open source and see how other people that I interact with, which are mostly women in tech, I polled on Twitter to see what kind of experiences people had. And I'm just going to read them to you. Jen Schiffer said, vulgar and brutal harassment, expectation and entitlement of your time without any compensation offered. The next one is, unfortunately, the harassment was enough for me to stop trying before I had other problems, so that's where I'm at. So they didn't even get to the point where they were contributing because of the harassment in general. This next one's anonymous because they didn't even want to be attached for fear of further harassment. Entitlement of time, the assumption you immediately want feedback when you're just starting, nerd pedantics, and obstructing learning. A coworker of mine and friend, Caroline, said, mansplaining mainly and a general fear that any commit I make will be opened as an issue and debated about. Caroline's involved a lot with security stuff, and she has a legit reason for being afraid because she has gotten doxxed and her family has gotten swatted. It's not cool that these things happen. And the next one is sent a pull request with bug fixes that got ignored for almost a year, after which the maintainer wrote the same fixes and said, oops. Next is Tess, who also said mansplaining my own code to me and trolling. Tess is pretty relevant because she open sourced something a little bit last year called Echo Chamber JS, which is all of the commenting, none of the comments. What it is it's a third-party script that you add to your website that utilizes local storage with your comments form. So all the people that want to say garbage will post, hit that send button, it'll store locally on their machine, and they'll get to feel proud of themselves for being an asshole, but nobody else ever has to see it, which is really awesome. And when she made this, which is clearly not serious, more of social commentary on internet comments, she got trolled. This awesome, kind gentleman with the Steve Jobs icon that says, I dead, opened a pull request or an issue that says, you're fat, and then they were like, that's not enough. So they changed it from you're fat to you're fat and insecure. And then another one from Ghost, who I believe is one of those people that only complains on repositories and maybe commits to some things. I'm going to read this whole thing because it's really sad. I'll read it, maybe I'll be quick. Web development or web design does have a psychological part besides the technical part, and this library is intended to give the illusion to the user that he engages with the website by commenting it. It clearly has the intent to dupe or trick the end user, as no indication is given that his or her message will not be sent through the network. I'll skip the next one, and it says, such library seems to raise ethical concerns about the relationship between the maintainer of the website and the end user. It is promoting relationships based on duping another. That is a form of irresponsibility and indifference. Is it any good? Just asking to myself. And I'm going to go ahead and answer him and say, no, nobody owes you shit, and you shouldn't feel entitled to even say this stuff. So when coming for a new project, my proposal for new contributors, which is something that I did myself, is find something you're passionate about. For me, it's cats, in a totally healthy way, I swear. Or something new that you want to try. For me, it was hardware and some back-end stuff. Make something cool and open source it yourself, which is this grade school science project with popsicle sticks and tape and wires. Because when you do that, the first point of contact for you is your peers, and people that respect you as a human being are going to give you constructive criticism, which is 1 billion times more helpful than randos being jerks. So, these are my cats. Their names are Rick Deckard and Reset Smith. Rick is fat, and Reset is very handsome. I like cats a lot. I've been talking about building a cat feeder bot forever, to the point that I think I just annoyed some of my friends, and they were like, just do it. You have to do it, so you shut up about it. From past JSConfs in Florida, I had loved my brief experience with the NodeBots community. It's so friendly and really helpful. The documentation's amazing, and all the people are really great. And plus, there's Slack channels, there's Gitter channels. People even answer you on Twitter, even when you sometimes don't want them to. It's like excessively helpful. So I decided to build a node-based cat feeder that works over the web, and that's this thing. And it is RoboKitty. Here's my cats again. That's Reset. I said he was handsome, and that's Fat Rick. So the tech that I picked for this project was Node.js, Johnny 5, which is a JavaScript robotics library, Socket.io, and then when I was trying to decide what microcontrollers to use, I struggled a little bit. First, I wanted the Arduino Uno because it already has that internet connectivity. No, it does not. And that's why it didn't work. So I grabbed the Arduino Uno, which does have the internet connectivity, but it wasn't compatible with Johnny 5. And then I finally settled on the particle photon. So I spent a lot of money, so you don't have to. The part list for this is a typical dry goods dispenser, which I got on Amazon. It's the kind that they put cereal in at hotels for continental breakfast. It's about $20. A particle photon kit with a breadboard, which also runs like $20, $30. A continuous servo, which is taped onto the front. And a 4 AA battery pack with an on-off switch, which I would not recommend. Instead, figure out how to plug it in, because that thing eats batteries like crazy. And miscellaneous hardware accessories that I use are male jumper wires, which are for connecting the breadboard to the servo, and I had to solder a little bit, and some heat shrink. So never having worked with any of this stuff before, I bought it all, and I'm at home. I kind of have an idea in my head of like how it's going to work from point A to point B. And then I'm like this otter trying to like put all the pieces together, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, in short, like things pretty much went smoothly, except that electricity scares me. I don't understand Ohm's law at all, so I thought that I was going to constantly electrocute myself, which wouldn't really be possible even with the amount of power coming through there, now that I know. I also didn't realize that I needed to externally power the servo. I was like, all right, this microcontroller has power. So if I plug this into the microcontroller, then it should work, right? No, it doesn't. I also had no idea how to solder when I began. Now I know how to solder. I'm really good at it. But so what I did is I went on YouTube and I Googled how to solder, as you do when you don't know how to do something. And the video results that I got was a very helpful doomsday prepper. He was wearing full camouflage. He had, I don't know, probably like ready-to-eat MRE food rations, and he was just like, you take this wire, you take this wire, and he didn't even like try and preach about any other things. It was really great. So then I was ready to test. The code was working awesome. I'm using a cron job currently because I wanted to not only have it dispense food immediately, I also wanted it to be timed. There's better ways to do it. You can open a pull request if you want to fix it for me. And the servo was strong enough to turn the feeder handle, which I was a little bit worried about. If you have it totally full, is food going to come out? So everything was working great, except it wouldn't stop at all. If you push the button, like everything that was in there would just keep on coming out and all over the floor. And like Fat Rick loved that, but that's like the opposite of what I wanted to happen. So I do what I always do when something doesn't work, which if you follow me on Twitter, I'm sure you saw this morning because I couldn't get it to work. I started freaking out. I just like yell and I'm like, why? What's happening? I'm sad. It's probably Rick Waldron's fault because it's fun to blame things on him. It wasn't this time. It was that time though. But I looked to my peers for help. Like I mentioned before, the Gitter chat was amazing. Brooklyn JS, which is where I'm from, made a NodeBots room so I would stop bothering them in DMs. People reviewed my code. Actually, Suze, who's talking tomorrow, reviewed my code, and she was like, nothing's wrong, it looks great. And then I was like, well, what's happening? But then something awesome happened. It was a bug in Johnny 5, and it was Rick Waldron's fault. So I tweeted, the code for my automated feeder is done. If I didn't already have a cat named Rick, I'd name the one after Rick Waldron. And he found the bug, he fixed it, and then it worked. And that felt so good, because if somebody else wants to build it and it didn't work, that would be a huge problem. So now I'm going to show you a little bit of the server code as it was when I first wrote it. This was my first time trying any of this stuff, so I kind of just like dumped it into a huge file. And this was done in November, and it's since evolved into way more elaborate stuff, but I'll show you this a little bit. I have like a regular Node app running. It didn't have any routing at the time. You just set up your little server thing. Sorry, word wrap isn't on, but I'm not going to scroll over. This is how you set up your board with Johnny 5. And then the cron job is really ugly, but there it is. And then once it's on and connected, what it's doing is it tells the servo to stop in case it's on already, which I don't know why it would be. It's just like, just in case you're on, stop. And then it turns on a little bit and goes backwards in case there's a jam, and then turns forward again. And is like, yay, there's food. And it's set to New York, so obviously if you're not in New York and you want to feed your cats on a normal schedule, you'd have to change that. And then so that's the server code, and then the client code before routing was added in was just a plain website, and it sets it to every few hours and then clears the schedule, and then there's some inline script at the bottom. And the site's really cute because it's on theme and it looks like this, which I'll show you a little bit later. So once it worked, the cats were like, yeah. This is not a picture of Rick, I promise. So I was almost ready to open source it. I was getting really close. Things were working out great. And I put a call out on Twitter for code reviews because I wanted, people that I trust to check it before people tear it apart. And the response was pretty overwhelming. So many people helped me out. The contributions went from like just me, like sad at my coffee table because my apartment's not big enough for a dining room table, to like a ton of contributions. They added in routing, they refactored it, there's like an NPM module, I don't even know if it's done, but yeah, they helped a lot. And then I just told you all this. And they review the README for language. That's like the biggest part of this project. Since I didn't know what I was doing when I started, I wanted to write the README as if someone that had no idea what they were doing technically could go in and get the code and do everything step by step. So I made no assumptions. It's really long. And honestly, writing language that was accessible to anyone without like guessing what their technical background was probably harder for me than this whole entire project. But I wanted somebody, if they were interested in it, to have the same experience that I had when I was interested in NodeBots and be able to just like pick things and then go find out how to do it and be able to set it all up. And after they did all this for me, like the most exciting thing for me was that they actually liked it. So I was really happy. And then I got to test it with the cats. It worked. It used to be cardboard, but cardboard doesn't travel really well, and popsicle sticks does better. Rick was my tester, and we got this really cute animation of him being like, yeah, it's time to eat. So it worked really well. I was ready to launch finally, and what I did is I changed the repository to public. I tweeted about it. For some reason, I submitted a link to Hacker News, and then I took a nap. And when I woke up from my nap, it was on the front page of Hacker News, and people weren't being jerks, which is surprising. It was off-brand, but I was happy, although someone was like, you could have done this, and I was like, whatever, you do it. I don't have to. People retweeted it a lot. It's like way more than this now, and there's been some forks and requests for it to be on different microcontrollers, which I'm going to do after this because I spent 3 hours this morning trying to get it to work. And it was starred a ton. It's actually over 700 now, which, you know, not a measure of your self-worth, but it was my first open source project, so it felt really great. But the best, most exciting part was that I was huge in Japan, and this is like, from what I can gather, the like Japanese equivalent of TechCrunch, I guess. There were some things lost in translation. They assumed that I'd never done any programming whatsoever, so that's probably why they wrote about it. They thought it was a lot cooler than it actually was. Or cats, who knows? So the things that I learned from this whole project was don't be afraid of the unfamiliar, because what you don't know at the beginning, you will know at the end, and then you'll be able to tell other people about it, and everybody wins. Also, don't be afraid to ask for help. This is something that I had struggled with for a while due to like bad experiences in tech, but people that are like willing to help you are great. And then once they help you, you can help other people. And it's just an endless, nice cycle of helping. People really like cats. Unless you don't, and then why? Don't downplay your abilities. When I started talking about this project, I was like, I mean, it's just a microcontroller turning a servo. But I probably should have been like, it's a really awesome cat feeder. And like the only person that was probably like, well, not the only person, the person that thought it was the coolest was my mom. And she was like, you should hire a lawyer and get a patent. I was like, Mom, that's not what open sourcing is. Like, and then I don't care. And if you saw this thing, you would not agree. Also, I really, really, really like NodeBots. They're so much fun. There's so many things that you can do with it. I mean, you can pretty much pick. There's a ton of different microcontrollers, and then you're just like, I want to connect a light or a switch or a button or a potentiometer or an accelerometer, and they'll tell you exactly how to do it, and then you can do silly things like this. And now is the moment of truth. All right, let's see if this demo works. Give me 1 second. I'm going to close this. Node.app.js. It is connected. Localhost. This is RoboKitty, isn't it cute? I'm going to turn the battery on. And there is candy in here, so if you like candy on the floor, it's your lucky day. I'm going to let it all run out. All right, and then I have one more thing to show you, not on the feeder. And it's basically just the end of my talk. So yeah, thank you. I'm Oho on Twitter. If you want to contribute to the repository at all, it's RachelNicole/RoboKitty. And my website is rachelisawesome with a .me, and I'm cool online for all the weird stuff that I like to make. And please feel free to eat this candy. It's been down there for longer than 5 seconds, but it's probably still good. Thanks.